Well, they are ranked. Ohio State's ranked. How formidable of an opponent are the Buckeyes?
So the Big Ten, we have 6 teams in the Big Ten. We're obviously the youngest. Everybody else, Ohio State's like 75 years old. Everybody else is over 100 years old. So we're playing catch up. The other 5 schools in the Big Ten right now are all legitimate Final Four contenders. And so the end of our season right now, these last 5 weeks playing the Big Ten, to put it in football terms, we're playing Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama over these last 5 weeks. That's what we're doing. It's been amazing to see the growth of Big Ten lacrosse. We're only 3 years old as a conference, and a lot of people are talking about our conference as the best lacrosse conference in the country now. And so we're trying to catch up and do our part.
You've got Hopkins and Maryland in that league
We do.
as well, and they're the lacrosse blue bloods. Are they a measuring stick of sorts for the program, kind of setting the standard for where you guys want to be?
Yeah, I think Hopkins has 44 national championships.
Mm-hmm.
So their homecoming is in the spring because that's when lacrosse season is. So we're trying to catch up not only to that level of play, but also to that culture, mm-hmm. where we can compete with programs like that. But we're getting there. We've taken some significant steps this year, as has everybody else in our conference. And as our recruiting really hits full stride over the course of the next 2-3 years, as our new facilities are done over the course of the next year, we're going to be there pretty soon.
Yeah, where do you recruit? Is it more of an East Coast thing?
Not anymore. So lacrosse traditionally has been an East Coast sport, and it's really coast to coast now. The hotbeds are still in the East, the places where it's really emphasized as a lot of places where it's the #1 sport in the high school. But if you're not recruiting the West Coast, if you're not recruiting Canada, if you're not recruiting the middle of the country now, you're not getting it done because it's grown so much.
What kind of challenges have you faced going from being a club sport to this point where, like you said, the Big Ten is one of the premier conferences in lacrosse?
I think part of it is just managing expectations. We're at Michigan, right? And so we want to compete and win as quickly as we possibly can. At the same time, there's a process, and we have to believe in that process, and we have to attack every day. And it's really just this year that we're starting to see the results that can come out of following that process and believing in it. We came into the Big Ten season 8-1, which is our combined win total over the previous 2 seasons, and so. We have measurables now that where our guys can see that what we're doing and the way we're doing it is working, and now we just have to keep plugging away to catch up to the guys who are ahead of us.
It seems like in the state, maybe past 10, 15, 20 years, lacrosse, it was a club sport at a lot of high schools. It's kind of grown. How big is, going with the Premier Conference thing, Michigan thing, a game like this, how big is it in terms of exposure, especially for, like Midwestern kids?
It's so important. The kids, in Baltimore, for example, have 15 Division I programs all within a few miles. Some of the top 10 programs in the country are right there. So they grow up, just like kids here get to grow up and watch high-level football, basketball, the more traditional sports. They grow up around it. And so having Division I programs here, and the only 2 men's programs in the state right now are us in Detroit, but having them here, having us bringing in programs like Maryland and Hopkins to play so kids can see the sport played at the highest level. Is such an important part of the growth here. And then, it's a great example in Michigan of how fast it's grown. When I was in high school, which was a long, long time ago, at Pioneer across the street, we were the 13th program in the state to add. And that was after I graduated in '89. There's 130 some programs now in Michigan, and it continues to grow. And so, and having Division I programs like these in the state, having the competition level that we do, I think just brings more attention and helps that growth.
What has the growth, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe like late 90s, early 2000s, it seemed like lacrosse started spreading a little bit as a varsity sport. Can you kind of describe as far as the growth spurts like during recent years?
I think you're right. Michigan State cut their program in '97, and that was right before the growth spurt started. Had they been in a different situation and maybe it was 5 years later and they'd seen the trend, maybe lacrosse doesn't get cut back then from there. But right about late 90s, you nailed it, is when it really started blowing up. I don't know that any of us saw it coming. We all love the sport and we all kind of see why it's happening, but if you would have told me 20 years ago that our sport would be at the point it is now, I wouldn't have believed it.
So how does someone from Ann Arbor Pioneer High School get into lacrosse?
We've had a club program here since 1940, and there was a guy named Bob DiGiovanni who coached the men's program off and on for 33 years before I took over. I grew up with his sons. He was doing it part-time. He was also an engineering professor here, and he had played at Cornell. But I grew up with his son, so I had a stick in my hand in high school. We tried to get it going. I was a traditional athlete, football and basketball, the sports that were available back then, but always wanted to play lacrosse, and it was part of my college decision was to look for opportunities to get into the game.
What is he,
After losing perhaps the most, important player in program history from last year at Kyle Jackson and several other important pieces, did you maybe anticipate this being the year of the turnaround, or did you see it more as a rebuilding type of year heading into the season?
I'm actually not surprised by what we've been able to accomplish so far this year. I think, sometimes when you lose a great player, Kyle is the best player we've had in the program to date, but sometimes when you lose a great player, it allows everybody else to step up as well. And we've seen a lot of that, especially offensively this year, where we miss it, and we miss the things he can do, no question, but we're also playing a little bit more together than we were before.
Is that something you maybe sat down with Brent and Ian before the season and sort of told them, had the conversation of, we need you guys to step up and fill that role heading into this year?
We knew we wouldn't be able to fill that role. Brent has been an incredibly pleasant surprise. We knew the potential he had, but for him to come on as fast as he has been a huge help to our program. He's a very different game than Kyle, even though he's filling his position. But that's been, it was more about those guys not taking everything on themselves and allowing the offense to work. And I think when you have a great player, especially as a young program and you're not as deep talent-wise, you lean really heavily on your superstars. And now we don't have to do that as much anymore.
Do you have a core group of fans who